The SeeIt video we'll be talking about today is a little different from the rest we've been going through. We've been using blocks all along, but now we get to create blocks of our own. So I want to talk a little bit about what we call modular programming. Modular programming is about taking parts of your program that do a particular thing and bundling them together. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing here with our own blocks, is bundling some stuff together and creating our own block from it. And in Scratch, the way that we really fulfill modular programming is through creating our own blocks. I hope that makes sense. So when it comes to creating our own blocks, it's really fairly simple. There's a make a block I guess, that we'll use. And when you go through the process of making a block, it's going to create a little purple block that's a define block. And then you take that block and you put it out on the scripting environment and you add regular blocks to it. And together they become your very own custom block. Now, one other thing that we can do with blocks, or our own personal block, is this idea of a parameter. And parameter is basically a variable, but it's a variable that I send into the block when I use it. And then within the block, I can use that variable. So when I go through the process of creating my own block, there's an option where I can pick what type of parameter I want to use, whether it's a number, a string, a Boolean. Boolean means true or false, or a label, which is just some text. And I can select one of those. If I don't select one, then I don't have a parameter. But if I do have a parameter, if you notice on this program, in the circled area, I have a parameter called number1, and then I use that parameter number1 inside of my block. That's basically what we're talking about doing. Now, once you've created your very own block, you use it like any other block. You just drag it onto the scripting area, just like any other block. Now notice the one that had a parameter on it, I typed in the word 100 here. So that 100 then goes back to, it comes in right here as number 1 and is set, so the total is set to 100. So it's pretty easy to use the blocks. But one other thing I want to talk a little bit about is this thing called recursion. Recursion basically means calling yourself. And so within a block, it's calling the block within the block. And that can be kind of confusing, but basically it works kind of like a loop. Now, just like where we have a loop, we have to have a way of breaking out of the loop. So it's important that you have both of those. They can be an amazingly powerful tool that in some ways can be more easy to read and understand than loops themselves. So with that in mind, let's now take a look at an example of using my blocks, creating our own blocks, and using them. Our example now is going to show you how to create your very own blocks. Once again, I'm in the Scratch environment. I've got a little pink ballerina as our sprite this time. And let me first show you how to create your very own block. So we're going to come here to More Blocks and click on that one. And then I'm going to make a block. And right in here is where I type the name of it. So we're going to make a block that just goes through and displays some numbers. So I'm going to call it print numbers. And here's that little option that I showed you if you want to add parameters. We're not going to add them in this case, but they're there. So I'm going to click OK. Now it automatically created this purple define block for me. And I'm going to attach to this what's basically the program that defines my block. So we're going to count through 5 times, and we're going to say some numbers between 1 and 5. That's pretty simple. We'll start with a variable called count. Seems like we have to have one of these in just about every one of our programs, don't we? And we'll move it over here, and we'll set it equal to 1. Then we're going to use repeat until, and we want to repeat until count is greater than 5. We do it greater than 5 like that because that way it also includes 5. If I was to say until count equals 5, the problem is that it would evaluate it at the top here, and count hasn't changed. Count changed to 5, but then it would drop out before it actually does the stuff in the middle. So we're going to say count is greater than 5. All right, so let's think. We're going to be really make it easy here. We're going to think count. And then, of course, we need to increment or add to count by 1. And so here we have a program. It's going to count from 1 to 5, and it's going to think, or the ballerina, our sprite, will think the number from 1 to 5. So how do I run this program? This isn't something I can run. It's just a way that it's defining it. So I come here and I get whatever my starting event is. I'm going to have this click the sprite. Now if I go back to block, you notice that print numbers as a block is right here. So I'm just going to drag it over and click it. Now let's see what happens when I click the sprite. There. It counts 5 times, just like we programmed it to. All right, let's make another block. This one we're going to call count numbers. I guess that's kind of what the last one did, isn't it? But in this case, we're going to take an input parameter of a number. So if you click on this top one here, add input and add number input. I can't say it. Oops. You notice I clicked it twice and it added 2 of them. We just want 1. Click OK. All right, now we're going to drag this one and put it down here. Now what we want to do in this case is we're going to have the main program over here give us a number that we'll start with as we start to do a calculation of total. So let's come back in here and let's create a new variable called total. You notice that in our definition, count numbers, there now is another variable right here called number1. That's our parameter. So we're going to set, let's drag over here, and we're going to set total using the drop down to, I'm going to drag this little number over, number 1 over here and put it there. So what this basically means is at the beginning of our program, or at the beginning of our block, whatever value comes in at number 1 is going to now be set to total. So that's where total is going to start. Now let's put in some of the rest of the stuff so it's kind of like our one above it. We're going to start count with 1. We're going to do one of our repeat until loops again. We're going to do a greater than. So we're going to say count, repeat until count is greater than 5. Now, rather than saying something here inside, we're going to calculate total inside here. We're going to say total, change total by count. That just means it's going to accumulate by the value of count each time in the loop. Now, we need to have our little count incrementer like we had over here in the top one. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say the value of total. Now that's outside the loop because we don't want to do that every time. We just want to say it at the end once we're all done. Okay? So let's go through this really quick. We're defining count numbers. We're passing a parameter called number1. That comes in right here in the first block where we set total to number 1. So if we passed a 10 in here, then we would set total to a 10 right off the bat. Count, we're setting to 1. We're going to count from 1 to 5. While we're looping through here the 5 times, we're going to keep adding to the value of total by count. So it's going to start with 10, and then the next time through it's going to be 11 because we'll add 1, and the next time it's going to be 13 because we added another 2, and the next time it's going to be 16 because we added a 3, and the next time it's going to be 20 because we added a 4, and the next time it's going to be 25 because we added a 5. Then when we're done, it's going to say the total. Okay, so let's get rid of this print numbers block here, and let's drag out the count numbers block. And let's set it to 10, and let's see if 10, when we do this, the ballerina ends up saying 25, because that's kind of what we think it's going to be. So we'll click on her, and she says 25. So our main program doesn't have so much in it that it gets really confusing. We're able to modularize or create different modules that do certain things for us, and that's what we've done by defining these 2 different custom blocks. So I hope this helps you to learn a little bit more about custom blocks. Good luck as you go through the Learn It and the Try It exercises.